Hello everyone, it's me again. This is part 5, if I'm not mistaken, of my art and writing vlog. I'm going to real quick look at something and open it so I can do this right. Yeah, I'll start with this one. Probably most people won't know the series, but well. So yeah, in the last one I told you a bit about me as a writer in general and my career in writing and stuff. I'm gonna apologize right now for the crappy camera footage, but it is almost... Oh, it actually is 6 o'clock in the evening now, and nightfall is starting to happen here on this rainy Saturday afternoon, evening-ish. Yeah, I'm basically going to use these 14-ish minutes I still have to tell you about more detailed about writing. And writing starts, as I said last time, with a pen and a notebook most of the time. Now, nowadays, you start with your laptop and your Microsoft Office Word program, or in my case, PowerPoint. I'm going to tell you how I start off most of my stories. Now, stories, I'll probably do that over the next 2, maybe-ish videos. So anyway, most stories are divided in different parts that you need to have. There is the actual story, the idea, the characters, there's the actual story, the characters, and the ideas, and you somehow have to tie that into a whole story that works. Now, anyone can write, but what separates a good writer from a bad writer is, to me, not spelling and grammar. While that does play a great part in whether or not people actually enjoy reading what you have written. That does play a big part, as I said, but to me, the biggest thing, what really sets apart a good writer, a really good writer, from a really bad writer, is that a good writer can tell you a story and keeps you coming back. They can write chapter after chapter after chapter, and at 60 chapters they still have your attention because you still want to know how it ends. Now, good examples of this, of writers like this, are on fanfiction.net. I will post the link again and the names. My friend Snowdragonct, she writes really, really awesome Gundam Wing fanfiction, and even if you don't know the series, it doesn't matter, because especially her stories, Witness Protection and Boot Camp, are awesome, and I encourage everyone who looks at this to go and read it. Even if you don't know the Gundam Wing series, you will love these stories. She can just grip you with something and keeps you coming back, and she can end a story totally normal and it'll still feel like a cliffhanger. A cliffhanger is where, just like in a movie, the story suddenly ends in the middle of a scene and you don't know whether or not the characters are going to be okay, and you want to, if it's a really good cliffhanger, you want to see the next episode, or you want to read the next chapter because you need to know that they are going to be okay. That's how well they are written. So yeah, that's basically what sets apart a really good writer from the not so good writers. That's not to say that there are actually, that I think that people are bad writers. It's, well, there are writers of which I say, oh my god, this story sucks so much. But that's not to say that they as a person are a bad writer, it's just that the story doesn't interest me then. And sometimes there are writers, and this is again why I say that grammar and spelling do play a big part. While I can read over a few spelling errors and a few missed words or wrongly written words or misplaced reading signs. I mean, I'm Dutch, I write English stories. I suck at grammar a lot of the time, and somehow I manage to do it decently, but most of the time there are still people who come like, oh, in that line you misplaced that and that. And again, half of the time, if people don't tell me why it is misplaced and how it should be done right, I won't understand it. And I've had a really good friend who beta read my stories, that is proofreading, as in they read the story and check for any errors in it or things that don't make sense. And she would tell me, she would grab the line, write it down, then write under it how she would write it, and explain to me why her version is better, or why I mistook the comma placement, or why it should have that reading sign there and not there, or stuff like that. And that really helps a lot. So to all the people who write reviews to stories out there, I would just like to say, if you're going to comment on something that someone did wrong, then please, please, for the love of writing, tell the people why it is wrong and how you do it right. That is very, very important to us writers. If we, especially those of us who write in a different language from their maternal language, if we did not have the same grammar rules as Americans, here in Holland we have different grammar rules, and it's a fact that until 2002 grammar was just not at all important here in Holland. I, for one, the biggest part of grammar I learned was not to start a solicitation, a job letter to that you write when you want a job, and you tell a person you want a job and why they should take you and all that, is not to start that with I. You do not start with I in that kind of letters. That was our grammar. And our other grammar was start with a capital and with a reading sign. A dot, a question mark, an exclamation mark, you name it, and quote, unquote, spoken sentences. That was our grammar. Where the hell the comma got in, hell if I know back then, but I had some really good friends that really taught me, how to do the grammar right. So yeah, I've been rambling on enough about that. So back to story. The three things that make up a story are the characters, the writing, and the ideas. Now, it's easy to just write down some stuff, but that doesn't make it a story. You can write down a grocery list for all I care and call it a story, but that doesn't make it a story. A story isn't a story in that way. A story isn't just a bunch of words on paper. It's got content. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, most basic writing classes will tell you that the beginning of the story is where you introduce your characters and the story and tell a little about the world you're writing in, the world that the story is taking place in, and stuff like that. The middle is where you build up the story. It's where you go to... Okay? The middle is the big climax of the story. Here everything you told in the beginning works up to that point somewhere in the middle of the story where everything comes together. So, take an action story, for example, taking Gundam Wing, since I'm familiar with that. The beginning would be, in most of my fanfics at least, it's the end of the wars. The wars are over, the guys have won, Preventers is made to maintain whatever peace. Peace and love. Very important. And in comes my character and tiptoeing around in that world. So basically in the beginning I introduce my character. I introduce what her relationship toward the canon characters is in the case of fanfiction. In the original series, you just use the beginning of the story to illustrate the world it takes place in, to talk about your characters and their backstories if you want, or where they are now, how they got there, whatever. You know. Basically, it's just a big introduction to the story, the beginning, and from there you start to write on, and things start to happen, more things happen, in comes the bad guy, and it all comes down to that. The big climax, the big giant battle, the height of the story, and good writers can build up to that, but really, really good writers can build up to that, keep you on the tip of your seat at that point, and then build down to the end where everything comes together and they live happily ever after or not, as you wish it to be, and still keep the writers interested. A lot of stories that are out there on the internet sadly go up to the big climax and then just like leaves come falling down, and some don't even get past there and just end it there and don't know what to write anymore. And sadly to say, a lot of my fanfics often end before the big bad battle, and I'm still thinking I want to finish that. The one I told you about, no I didn't, because I restarted. Anyway, I have this one fiction where I asked people to send me their characters because I needed a challenge at the time, and it was easy for me, sorry cramped, to write a story with my own characters, and I found it might be a bigger challenge if I asked people to send me their characters. So I actually had character profiles of characters I know nothing about. I didn't hash out myself, and I had to work with that. So I did that, and it turned out pretty nice, and people are still asking me to finish that, even, 2 years after it went on hiatus. It takes place mostly in the X-Men universe, and I transported the Gun and Wing characters to the X-Men universe, and I asked people, because I didn't want to use the actual X-Men crowd as shoo-ins for who the guys would fall in love with eventually, because that sort of sucked, because all of them seem like in their late 20-ish, early 30s, and some even older, and it just didn't feel right to put 16-ish to 20-ish, 23-ish old boys in there and have them fall in love with characters almost double their age. So yeah, I asked people to send in their characters, and the only character I used, the only original character I used that was actually two of mine, were Hiroyui's sister that I thought of, named Rinlo. Yes, her codename in the X-Men universe would be The Omen, which is basically another self of her. I made it so that in general, Rin doesn't really have any mutant powers other than healing a little, and telepathy only connected to her brother and friends. She's basically just a normal human girl who can make little cuts and bruises go away. And I made her so because her other self, Omen, is a sort of almost ethereal, almost immortal being. Not immortal, but definitely a higher being that could transport people through time. I made it so that that Omen will only wake up if something world-changing happens. Something that could potentially destroy the world, so to say. And after that, Omen takes up so much energy, uses up so much energy on Rin's part, that Rin literally just regresses to her baby self and then has to, in a matter of weeks, grow back to her appropriate age. The other character was the girl with the cat ears named Kitty, who can control water. And since we're almost out of time, I'm going to leave it at that here, and in the next one I will go into detail about characters and tell you more about how I made characters. Well, laters!